How's it going, everyone? It is Skullzi here with the latest and the greatest gaming news. Today I want to talk about why I think Bethesda Game Studios really needs some serious competition. And while they may disagree with me about some of the things I'm going to say in this video, I feel like serious competition from another developer that makes similar RPGs is essential to save Bethesda Game Studios from continuing down a track of ignoring the majority of their fan base as well as oversimplifying their games. And before you react to this video way too harshly, this isn't going to be a Bethesda hate video at all, like in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I am making this video because Bethesda Game Studios is one of my favorite studios of all time, and they still are, and I truly feel like some healthy direct competition would not only benefit Bethesda and their future games, but also in turn greatly benefit the community as well. That is the point I am going to be making in today's video, and this point is the exact reason why I am both very excited for Once Lost Games and why I plan to promote and cover their next-gen RPG as much as possible. But in order to explain how direct competition would benefit Bethesda Game Studios, first I have to explain why there is a problem to begin with. And the things I am about to say I feel like the majority of the Bethesda community would agree with as well. First off, it is obvious that Bethesda Game Studios has reached a certain level of comfort within the gaming industry. I say this because they feel comfortable enough to make major changes to otherwise successful franchises, as well as taking complete shots in the dark when it comes to trying new things. The first statement stems from obvious changes that Bethesda has been making to both The Elder Scrolls and Fallout over the last few games. Both franchises share the same issues in common. Bethesda has made it clear that they are trying to make their games more accessible to a different type of gaming audience. The early Elder Scrolls games and even Fallout 3 certainly had deeper RPG mechanics and a more robust stat system that allowed for deeper character building and management. However, Fallout 4 and Skyrim and even Oblivion in some ways went a little bit of a different route. Still hanging on to RPG mechanics, however, also blending these mechanics with more action-focused gameplay. They took away from a lot of the number and statistic management and instead streamlined the perks and level up systems to be a lot more simpler as well and a lot less work to manage, and also more visually appealing. It seems like more work went into the little cartoons on Fallout 4 or the cool constellation level up thing in Skyrim rather than went into actually making these RPG mechanics and the level up system have a lot more depth. And this oversimplification wasn't really what the community was even asking for in the first place. The Bethesda Game Studios community exists because of the already successful and smart decisions Bethesda made with their previous RPGs. Taking away from the depth of the RPG elements that brought their fanbase to their studio in the first place will obviously negatively affect the opinions of these community members, and that is what we have been seeing since they've been making these decisions. Bethesda even went to removing complete schools of magic and very popular spells in the Elder Scrolls franchise for some reason, and when it came to Fallout 4, Bethesda even took a bigger shot in the dark with having a voiced protagonist for the first time like ever. And again, most of the fanbase grew accustomed to not having a voice protagonist for immersion purposes, but Bethesda seemed very comfortable with taking that risk, as they must have assumed their sales would still be high enough to justify any negative backlash. And you know what? They were right, at least in a sense. They even felt comfortable enough to do what they 100% knew would piss off the majority of their fanbase, making a multiplayer-only Fallout game. And on top of this, they released the game with several bugs, even more severe than the usual Bethesda Game Studios games at release, and to top that off even more, many felt the game lacked a severe amount of content at launch. Bethesda Game Studios did take the time to listen to the community and improve Fallout 76 greatly, and now the game is actually a very good game. But my point is, they felt comfortable enough to take the risk in the first place by making a multiplayer game and releasing it with all these bugs, and they did all of this directly after a Save Player 1 single-player campaign, which is very odd timing to say the least. And to take things one step even further, despite Skyrim releasing almost 10 years ago and then again and again and again and again and again and again and again, Bethesda Game Studios feels yet again comfortable enough to take another big risk and make a completely new IP for the first time in like over 20 years. And even though the community is hyped for this game, for Starfield, including myself, my point is to not shame Bethesda or call them out for making any of these decisions even if they were inherently bad ones. My point in this video is not to shame them, but instead it is to make it very clear that they feel comfortable enough taking very big risks. And this could be a double-edged sword for any gaming company, as taking big risks could pay off in huge ways and change gaming forever. It didn't with Fallout 76, but it might with Starfield. But at the same time, these big risks could backfire entirely and end up costing gaming companies a lot more money than they make from sales and overall profits. There wouldn't be any profits, is what I'm saying, if this backfires completely. And if that happens too often, that is how companies go bankrupt, or at least massively downsize, which would be a critical blow for Bethesda. And in fact, they went through this already back when they were making a game similar to Starfield back in the late 80s and early 90s called The 10th Planet. The game was way too ambitious. They felt very adamant about it and kept pushing it until they almost went bankrupt, had to cancel the game, had to downsize, and then thankfully Morrowind saved the company. But again, Morrowind was a risk in itself, but this risk paid off, and I think that Starfield might pay off as well. But my point is, Bethesda Game Studios is taking some big risks. In fact, they're not even talking about Starfield, which is something they need to be doing a lot more, because Starfield is the one thing that could totally reverse any negative stuff that Bethesda Game Studios is dealing with right now. And although I don't think Bethesda Game Studios is anywhere near any position of worrying about going bankrupt or having to downsize or losing a ton of money, my point is they keep making these big risks, and it does worry me, like, a lot, actually. And I feel like part of the reason they are doing this and taking all these risks is because they don't feel like they have direct competition. Sure, there are plenty of other studios out there making RPGs, but other than CD Projekt Red, most of these studios aren't the same style of RPG that Bethesda Game Studios makes. Even The Witcher is a different style of RPG, in my opinion. The only thing it really has in common with the Elder Scrolls is they're both RPG, fantasy, open-world games, and Cyberpunk 2077 seems like the closest game to what Bethesda Game Studios would make, but even then the vibes between the two studios and games are completely different. Which brings us back to Once Lost Games. If you aren't familiar with them, I highly suggest you watch my previous video uploads breaking down the Wayward Realms, a game that, in my opinion, has the highest potential of directly competing and rivaling the Elder Scrolls 6 and Bethesda Game Studio RPGs in general. Not only is Once Lost Games founded by original developers and creators of the Elder Scrolls universe, but at the same time, the game they're aiming to create will be an immersive, adventure-focused RPG game, with similar depth, gameplay, and vibes to the early Elder Scrolls games, and they listen very well to the community feedback, in fact, and are very invested and dedicated to this game. In fact, until they find a publisher, they're working on this game for free. That is how dedicated they are to this game and how much they believe in it, and this game already has a huge community that really believes in them, myself included, so you should join in on this hype train while it is just leaving the station. As I said, the Wayward Realms is, in my opinion, the closest style of RPG to what Bethesda Game Studios would make, meaning Once Lost Games is legit the studio that could give Bethesda Game Studios the competition they have needed all this time. I feel between CD Projekt Red and Once Lost Games, Bethesda Game Studios will have more competition, focusing them more on what their fanbase already loves and enjoys about their games, and that this competition will be a huge benefit to Bethesda Game Studios, as direct competition like this is the driving factor behind creative inspiration. And while feeling comfortable enough to take risks isn't a bad thing, I feel like it's something Bethesda Game Studios has been pushing for a little too hard lately, and in my opinion, direct competition would be the needed friction in order to rubber band them back to where I feel they should be and where many people in the gaming community feel they should be as well. Remember, we can both love Bethesda Game Studios, CD Projekt Red, and even Once Lost Games all at the same time. There doesn't have to be any animosity here. We don't have to draw lines in the sand and start fights because someone has a different opinion about another game studio. We're all gamers here, we're all fans of RPG games, and hopefully Starfield and the Elder Scrolls 6 brings back a little more depth to their RPG mechanics. And remember, I keep saying this is 100% not a Bethesda hate video in any way. I love Bethesda Game Studios. This video is just me sharing my opinion why I feel Bethesda hasn't had enough direct competition lately, and hopefully I did a good enough job explaining why I think it could benefit Bethesda Game Studios greatly. That finishes up today's video though. As always, what I want to know is, what do you think about all of this? Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and if your comment wins the internet, you may get featured in a future video. Be sure to like the video if you enjoy the content, and if you want to stay in the know when it comes to the latest gaming news, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss the latest uploads. Follow me over on Twitter for other news that doesn't quite make it into my videos, as well as other channel updates, and check for links down in the description below for official Skullzi merchandise, the Skullzi Discord community server, and if you want to have your hand in providing future content, there are links on how to be an exclusive channel member or how to support the channel here on YouTube, over on Patreon, or Ko-fi as well. And as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time when Heat Pines founds Bethesda Studio Games, a direct competitor to Bethesda Game Studios.
just works.